So this story has multiple layers of shock. It almost has the makings of every single one of your nightmares. This has an Israeli at the center of this that is now basically free to go back to Israel after operating biolabs that contain some of the most dangerous pathogens in the world. It contains a Chinese businessman who owns a lot of these buildings where these labs were operated. And it also contains, well, all of these bio contagions that we're also extremely afraid of. And the fact that there's absolutely nothing the US government could do. There's no law against people just starting labs and experimenting on viruses like COVID-19. Yeah, that's what this story has in it. So this is Ori Solomon here on the screen. Ori Solomon is an Israeli who was arrested for operating an illegal, well, not even really an illegal biolab, I would say, because they're not actually illegal, but he was arrested for operating a biolab in Las Vegas and another one in Reedley, California. Now, what was he arrested for if operating a biolab is shockingly not against the law? Apparently, you could just operate biolabs. There's a huge gap in U.S. law on this. What was he charged with? Well, illegal dumping of hazardous materials. So he was arrested for this illegal dumping of hazardous materials for operating a biolab in Las Vegas. There was another one in Reedley, California that he was connected to, but he never was arrested for. Another person was arrested, and that would be a Chinese businessman was arrested, but again, not for operating an illegal biolab. No, instead, he was arrested for selling a bunch of faulty tests or something along those lines. Something made up some other reason to arrest this Chinese guy. Just like they made up this kind of reason to arrest this Ori Solomon guy. Well, Ori Solomon here was charged by the state and the feds. The state charged him with felony disposal and discharge of hazardous waste for the biological materials found in the Las Vegas home that he managed. And he also received a federal charge of illegal firearm possession because he's an Israeli citizen and he's not on a non-immigration visa, so he was prohibited from owning guns in the country. Now, these labs contained HIV, malaria, tuberculosis, COVID-19, dengue fever, and Ebola, potentially. That's what was on the labels. And over 1,000 samples of unknown liquids and biological materials were found, as well as 1,000 rats, or it was 1,000 mice, were believed to be genetically engineered test subjects. So we don't really fully know exactly what these labs were doing, but Ori Solomon was caught in the Las Vegas lab. But then when they realized, wait a minute, this guy is also connected in the Reedley, California lab, so maybe we've got like this big kind of lab problem going on. And then they found out that the Chinese businessman owns 37 different properties just in Vegas. We don't know where else he might own properties. And he might be doing these labs in these other properties. The government doesn't have the authority to go and search these properties just yet. So they don't know how many potential illegal, again, not illegal, because apparently it's totally fine to operate labs in the United States of America as long as you don't receive federal funding. Yeah, that's basically the law. If you don't receive any federal funding and if you don't work with certain select agents, the most dangerous pathogens like Ebola or anthrax, those are heavily regulated, then yeah, basically these invisible labs can work with pathogens that could still cause severe outbreaks, severe illnesses, death, and they can all operate without federal oversight. That is shocking about this case. But what's also shocking is that a federal judge, let me show you a photograph of this federal judge. This is Sigal Chattah, and she is an Israeli-born U.S. judge. And she is the one who let Ori Solomon basically go. She dropped the charges against, the federal charges, which was the illegal firearm possession, which holds a sentence of potentially up to 10 years. And she dropped that charge against him. Now he's only facing state charges, which is basically just disposal, get this, disposal and discharge of hazardous waste of biological materials. And the sentence, the penalty for this is maybe $1,000 fine, maybe up to 6 months in jail if they feel like giving that to you. Maybe 10 hours of community service. Oh, and you're supposed to help clean up the mess you made. I mean, here we are worried about labs in Ukraine, and we're worried about COVID being made in a lab, And apparently you can have labs here in the United States totally unregulated without any federal oversight. You could just be doing all kinds of stuff in there. And if they catch you, they have to figure out some other reason to charge you. And if it's hazardous dumping of these, whatever it is you're doing in your mad scientist lab, then maybe it's $1,000 fine and 10 hours of community service. I mean, this is insane. So it's insane. And then it's insane that we have this Israeli judge who then lets this guy go. So he basically gets no real time for operating what could be numerous labs around Vegas, around California, around who else knows where he might have some more properties. But let me just show you, if you don't remember everything, this was the original report on the Nevada biolab being raided.
Video revealing the hundreds of samples collected in vials and jugs. Days later, police identifying this man, Ori Solomon, as the property manager.
We have no knowledge that he had any expertise or is in that area, or he's somewhat of a trained biologist, no.
Court records obtained by Channel 13 show he's an Israeli citizen here on a non-immigrant visa. Authorities say he works for a Chinese citizen who goes by the alias David Herr, who owns the home on Sugar Springs Drive. Herr is in a California jail charged following a 2023 investigation of an alleged illegal biolab in Reedley, California. Leaders there holding a press conference this week.
Pathogens including samples of COVID-19. There was 1,000 transgenic mice that were there.
Investigators say much of what was found in that Fresno warehouse is consistent with materials found in the lab in Las Vegas. Solomon manages more than 30 short-term rental properties, including this one where the biolab was found in Las Vegas.
Okay, so there could be like 30-something more of these just in Vegas. Let's look at what was inside the lab.
Our investigation into the illegal medical lab operating in Reedley uncovers new details.
Fresno County Assistant Director of Public Health, Joe Prado, says, and court documents show, people associated with the lab told Reedley City and Fresno County officials they were located in China. We asked Prado whether or not the people involved were with the Chinese government, and here's what he said.
I can't confirm the connections to Chinese government. These are individuals, business owners that they've represented themselves to us that they live in China. That's to the extent that we are aware of. But confirmation to the government, I do not have any information in regards to that.
And that is
okay. So this is the Reedley, California lab. This is what they found inside of this one. And this one, they're heavily pointing to the Chinese, right? They're saying, oh, it's Chinese, not mentioning the Israeli. This was raided December of 2022. And however, officials didn't gain full access to walk through the facility until March of 2023 after meetings in January and February. And there was a nationwide recall of COVID tests. And that's when they were able to finally say, okay, you committed a crime, not operating a lab that is experimenting on mice and all kinds of God knows what. That's not the illegal activity. They had to find something else before they could finally get in there and raid the place. But this is what they found.
Not the only important information that we are learning here at 5. CBS 47's Medeiros Babb with what she has uncovered.
In my hands are the hundreds of documents about the horrors and dangerous nature of the illegal Reedley lab that was exposed several months ago by a city code enforcement officer. What was found inside would prompt the fire chief to send a letter calling it a potential disaster for the city. Nearly 1,000 overcrowded bioengineered mice, vials of blood, and this list of infectious diseases, including malaria, E. coli, chlamydia, COVID, and many others. That was what was found in this warehouse in Reedley. A city code enforcement officer first noted the illegal lab in December. She says a signed lease for the property shows the company moved in from its Fresno location to Reedley in October of 2022. Just a little over a month before the lab was discovered. For the first half of 2023, the process of cleaning the Reedley location was stuck in court. The hazardous electricity wires without permits, including added outlets for running refrigerators and freezers, unmarked stored highly flammable chemicals, and medical devices in cardboard boxes.
Can we just look at this? This looks like a mess, right? This facility looks like a total mess, and yet they're they're doing all kinds of crazy experiments.
Fire probability high and the risk of a possible explosion. That's what prompted Reedley Fire Chief Jerry Isaac to send this letter to the Reedley City Manager. In it, the chief outlined a planned evacuation zone in case of an emergency, which included the City of Reedley Police Department, Reedley City Hall, Kings Canyon Unified School District main office, and 12 homes. Due to a gas station right next door, the chief wrote in the letter that, quote, the concern increased of a potential disaster for our city, end quote. The letter was instrumental in the city getting warrants to go inside of the property, and since then, the city, county, FBI, CDC, and other state and local health agencies have been approved to start cleaning it up. In April, they euthanized over 700 of the mice. At the beginning of July, chemicals were removed, and right now, the cleanup continues. The removal of chemicals and other products will continue in the coming days and months, and city and county officials want to make it clear to the public that the public is not in as nearly as much danger as it was back in April when the letter from the chief was written, especially because since then, the electricity has been turned off and several hazards have been removed. Reporting in the studio, Madeiras Babs, CBS 47 Eyewitness News.
Right. Nothing to fear here because, we're able to contain viruses. That's what they're trying to make you believe there. Don't worry, nothing escaped from this lab that was obviously run so well. Now let's watch this Fox News report on the Las Vegas lab. So we'll go back to the Las Vegas lab. What's interesting about this lab in Reedley is they just connected it to the Chinese. They're like the Chinese government, the Chinese people, Chinese are doing this to us. Chinese labs, Chinese, this is some sort of like some sort of an attack on our country by the Chinese. And this is what Fox News has to say now about the Vegas report, about the Vegas lab.
New at 2, we're half past the hour, a possible biological lab inside a Las Vegas home, now under investigation. A federal investigation. Agents seizing vials of unknown liquids and probing a potential link to a Chinese national accused of running a similar lab in California that held deadly pathogens. Our senior national correspondent William Lajeunesse is reporting live on this out of Los Angeles for us. Hello, William.
Well, Sandra, two amazing things about this story. One, the man who owns that Vegas lab, he's a Chinese scientist linked to the CCP, is and has been in jail the last 3 years. Secondly, the lab is not an FDA licensed facility, but it's in a house in Vegas, raided Saturday morning by the FBI, SWAT pulling out boxes of what police believe are hazardous biological agents and pathogens normally found in a secure university or industrial lab with airlocks designed to prevent an outbreak.
Okay, so Chinese. You get the idea. They're just trying to point this whole thing to the Chinese, and they're saying, and they're operating this lab, and they're doing all of these things, failing to mention that it is apparently not illegal in this country to operate these labs. As long as you don't receive federal funding, there's no federal oversight. And as long as you don't actually experiment with things like anthrax and Ebola, which how would they know, then you haven't committed a crime. But how would they even know if you're experimenting with Ebola or anthrax or maybe something even more dangerous that they haven't even discovered yet if there's no federal oversight or legal oversight over your facility? They wouldn't know, not until it's too late. So that right there is extremely scary. We're worried about biolabs all across Ukraine, and it turns out our own country could be infiltrated with a bazillion biolabs from not just the Chinese, but really could be from people from, Americans, mad scientist Americans. It could be people from other parts of the world, or it could even be Israelis. And I bring up this judge again. Let me just bring her back up. This is Sigil Chadat. And why do I bring her up? The Israeli judge that let out Ori Solomon. He was facing 10 years in jail with the original federal charge, but she dropped the charge. And now he's facing a $1,000 fine and maybe 10 days in jail. Basically, he's able to go back to Israel. He's out and about and free. He's not sitting anywhere. He's totally free to just leave the country after operating these labs. But she's significant because she's connected to this guy. If you remember him, this is Tom Alexandrovich, and he was the Israeli that was caught during a sting operation. He was caught chatting up teenage girls, trying to meet up with them, and he did actually try to meet up. And that's when an undercover cop got him as part of a sting operation, and they arrested him as well as 7 or 8 others. Well, he was subsequently let go, and he's now in Israel a free man. He works for the Netanyahu government, works for Netanyahu's office. Sigil Chadat is the federal judge that people say that she let him go. It's not totally accurate, but it's not also not accurate. So the case was a state case, a Clark County, Nevada case. And it was Clark County, Nevada that essentially let Tom Alexandrovich out of jail without taking his passport, essentially without confiscating anything, which allowed him to flee to Israel. And then he just stayed in Israel, and he's supposed to come back to the States. I'm not even sure if he, but he left. He left the country. Okay. So the reason why she's connected, she then went on social media and criticized that and said, oh, how stupid of the state prosecutors to not demand that his passport be taken so he could basically flee. And now we have pedophile foreigners coming over here, and then they get to go back home. So she made this social media post. Well, the state prosecutors snapped back at her and said, wait a minute, we had phone calls with you. So you're now lying, basically, and you're criticizing us after we had phone calls with you, and you said you wanted us to take the case, that you didn't want to really be involved. And so she ended up, it was a federal charge that these men were facing, and her as the federal judge said, yeah, you know what, we don't want to deal with that. Let's just go ahead and leave it to the state, which is not what should have happened. It should have gone to onto the federal side, which means she would have had to deal with the case. But instead, she let the state handle it. And instead, knowing that state protocol was that they would not take the passport. That is just state protocol. And that's what these state guys said. They said, well, you know that it's our protocol that we don't do this. I mean, we'd have to make a special exception to take somebody's passport, and we don't ever really do that. So, we just followed our own protocol. Well, she knew exactly what that protocol was, and she chose not to actually take the case when she should have, because it was a federal crime that was committed. And instead, Tom Alexandrovich was let out, and he's sitting pretty in Israel. So people are looking at this one Israeli judge and thinking, isn't this a little odd that the Israeli judge would be connected to letting Tom Alexandrovich essentially flee the country? And now she's connected to Ori Solomon basically being allowed to flee the country. Now, again, she's not saying go ahead and flee. She's not, but giving them the ability to do so, knowing that they're let out of jail, they still have their passports, and they're free to go. And one could guess that Ori Solomon is taking his next flight out to Israel. So we've got multiple layers of frightening things going on all in one story. That is just the fact that there's all of these unregulated biolabs that are potentially being operated all around the country by nationals and foreign nationals alike for whatever their scary or benign motivations might be. Secondly, we've got an Israeli judge, effectively an Israeli-born judge, letting out Israeli criminals that are potentially extremely dangerous, the ones that we don't want let out into society, the ones that are operating biolabs that are potentially causing, like COVID-19 pandemic. Then we also have guys like Tom Alexandrovich that are the pedophile class that people are they want to crack down on that, of course. And on top of it, we still do have the Chinese, the national who owned these properties So Ori Solomon was the property. Ori Solomon was managing these properties and where these labs were found. The Chinese national is the one that owned the properties and operated these labs. So there's you've got Chinese on this, you got Israelis on this, you got biolabs on this. This is a cluster of a story, and it is quite scary. But basically, what it really boils down to is, who's in charge here? What is going on here? What's the deal with our country and our laws and our regulations that allow for any of this to happen at all? That would allow for foreign Chinese nationals, for example, to buy properties to operate labs. That would allow Israeli nationals to operate labs and then be let go when they're caught, to allow labs to be operated at all. I mean, all of this just comes down to where are the adults? Where are the adults in this country? That is the big question that we all want to know. But in the meantime, we're living in a much scarier world, I think, than we all thought we were. That is for sure. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, for free at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.